Big companies, big profits, zero taxes. That's the headline out of the latest report from the nonprofit Citizens for Tax Justice. The study followed a dozen of the country's largest corporations, including General Electric, which is a minority owner of NBC Universal. And while Main Street got squeezed during the Great Recession, these companies raked in major profits, over $170 billion worth to be exact, and they paid an effective tax rate of negative 1.5%, meaning that the companies got money back in the form of tax benefits. As Forbes puts it, not only have these 12 companies paid zero in taxes, they actually received tax subsidies that added $62.4 billion to their bottom lines. The study shows that not one single company paid anywhere close to the full 35% statutory tax rate. And to make matters worse, if just these 12 companies had paid at a 35% tax rate over the past 3 years, total federal revenues from corporate taxes would have been 12% higher than they actually were. It's pretty amazing when you think about it. It's time now to call in, though, Pat Garofalo, the economic policy editor for thinkprogress.org. Pat, it's good to have you on. Explain to all of us, because, so many of us we pay our taxes on time. We want to be good Americans, upstanding citizens. It's nice to get something back. But explain to all of us how these big companies can get away with this.
Well, the way these big companies get away with it is because the corporate tax code is an absolute disaster. While the rate is high on paper, it's so cluttered up with credits, deductions, loopholes, and there's so much outright tax evasion that companies end up paying next to nothing, or in the case of a company like GE, making billions in tax benefits on top of their billions in profits.
So are these 12 companies just the tip of the iceberg here, Pat? I mean, are there more corporations out there that are enjoying these tax loopholes but just aren't getting the attention?
Oh, absolutely. Corporate tax revenue in this country is at historic lows at the moment. 50 years ago, corporate tax revenue made up about 23% of total. Now it's down to about 6 or 7%. So this really is the tip of the iceberg.
All right, so explain, though, how can Republicans continue to make the argument about lowering taxes and doing so to say we're going to create job growth, but we're not watching job growth in this company? However, all these places, all these 12 companies, and then some are raking in these billions of dollars.
Well, that's exactly the problem. If we really believed that tax cuts created tons of jobs, we would have seen lots and lots of job creation over the last decade. It hasn't happened. Republicans like to dress up their tax cuts under the guise of tax reform, which, if you structured it correctly and did it right, you actually could lower the corporate tax rate while raising more revenue for the federal government. But the way Republicans want to do it will actually just end up costing the government more money.
All right, so both President Obama and Treasury Secretary Geithner have argued for deficit-neutral corporate tax reform. And you write this is a colossal missed opportunity. Why is that?
Because, like I said, corporate revenue is at historic lows, and you could easily reform the system in a way that brings the rate down, levels the playing field, makes the U.S. more competitive, but still raises more revenue. If you don't raise more revenue from the corporate tax code, that just means you're going to put more of the burden of deficit reduction onto the middle class, onto the working class. And actually, if you look at Ronald Reagan's 1986 corporate tax reform, that system raised more revenue after the reform than it did before.
All right, so you've written that both major parties have not been able to put together any type of vision for corporate tax reform that would raise net revenues and really tackle deficits. So explain to all of us what happens if they fail to act, and what does that do to the larger picture for the long run?
Well, if they fail to act, we're just stuck with this code that doesn't make any sense, and the taxpayer will continue to pay companies that are already hugely profitable.
And if they do act, what can we see change? I mean, if we're talking baby steps here, Pat.
I certainly hope at the very least they can start cleaning out some of the credits, cleaning out some of the deductions, getting rid of things like oil subsidies that make no sense when oil is $100 a barrel. Those are the sort of things you can kind of start scraping the surface of what is a huge problem.
And then maybe it can snowball from there. Pat Garofalo of Think Progress. Pat, great to have you on tonight. Thanks.
Thank you.